Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is the D20play live show roundtable. We got John here. David is traveling today, so David will not be joining us. We're going to talk about the OGL. We're going to talk about new upcoming products and favorite rules from hopefully all the systems we started looking at when Wizards was being a dick. Okay, so let's start out with the OGL, the big giant news,
Yeah,
and share this. So, John, did you think this would ever happen? There's any chance this would happen?
it's way bigger than a way bigger step, a way bigger move than I thought they would do. I would have expected them to do things like uh, go through let the whole survey process work its way out. You figure that they would come up with some middle ground or something like that. Um, the and even I mean they could have just announced, okay, we're going to leave the OGL alone. But I think that there was a clear understanding that they needed to do something bigger that would put an end to the conversation. I think they need to be done with this, and so releasing it with the Creative Commons license can't be undone. So
Yeah, that was huge. Let's look at the announcement here. So, when you give us playtest feedback, we take it seriously. 15,000 people filled out the survey. I imagine only people that were unhappy filled it out. That's generally how surveys work, right? If you didn't
yeah,
care, you weren't filling out the survey. But still, it's good that we had 15,000 people fill it out. 88% didn't want OGL 1.2 or publish under OGL 1.2. 90% would have to change their business if they were going to. 89% dissatisfied with deauthorizing 1.0. 86% dissatisfied with the draft VTT policy. And then we were satisfied with the SRD, but we wanted more content in the SRD. So
right,
they did three things. They left the OGL 1.0 in place as is. They made the entire SRD 5.1 available under Creative Commons license. And of
right.
course, we can choose which to use. So there's a link to the 5.1-CC. I have it open, but here's the Creative Commons license. I opened it up. Let me share that. There's a lot of stuff here, legal stuff, but from what I've seen, what I've read, it's really wide open. Do you have any experience with the Creative Commons, John?
A bit, yeah. In general, the this basically allows us to do what we want to as long as we attribute the content that's in the SRD to it back to itself. Um, we don't have to. There's no. Very often, like if you're using an image that's a Creative Commons image or something like that, you can't use it for variations of the Commons license. Will say that you can't use it for uh, anything that's going to generate revenue or anything like that. And there's none of those stipulations in this. We have to use it. We have to cite where it came from, or we don't have to use it. But if we use it, we have to cite where it came from, and that's it. We can do what we want with it, and that's about as open as we could ever expect it to be in our wildest dreams.
Yeah.
Um,
It almost feels like, I don't know if this is the case, but like the executives didn't know what they were agreeing to, and someone had rushed it out.
well, no, I think that's a possibility. I get a little bit frustrated with the community's yay we won attitude about this.
Mhm.
Uh, I think that there's a very real possibility that just like the heroes in a Dungeons and Dragons adventure, us villagers will never have any idea what heroes behind the scenes did to fight the big bad dragon.
Yeah.
They may limp out and tell us some stories. We'll never know what actually happened in there, and they may still be paying prices for the decisions that they made and the stances that they took in this within the corporate organization that they're in. But um, it's going to be years before we ever start to hear stories trickle out about what really happened behind the scenes. But I'm not so sure that this definitely happened because of our pressure. It happened because of the needs that we expressed and how important this is to us, and the way that the community responded to show the people who didn't understand just how collaborative and important the community is to the game. But I think we'll never know really who the heroes are and what happened. I think that we just need to have a lot of gratitude for all of the folks behind the scenes at Wizards who work on the D&D team, because they probably all had a piece of what was going on.
Yeah, that's a huge point. A corporation isn't an entity. I mean, isn't a single entity. It's not like Wizards is evil. There's good people in Wizards. There's people, that didn't have our best interests in mind at Wizards. And luckily, the people that wanted this overcame the people that did not. I'm sure all of our comments and feedback helped them in winning that
Sure,
fight. But
sure,
yeah,
yeah,
and of course, all the designers, caught up in the middle of this, all the people, all the creative people there at Wizards of the Coast. I felt bad for them, like I felt bad for anyone who wrote for OGL.
yeah,
Just caught up in the middle of this war that took place, and I'm glad we got here. The 1.0a. It would be nice if they added some more clauses to it that made it just, rock solid, irrevocable, non-authorization, can't be unauthorized, can't be gotten rid of, whatever words they need to add. But
right. But
still, this is a good step.
yeah, I,
And
I, I
so, go ahead, John.
well, I think that there's clearly a certain amount of we're going to leave everything as it is. It's striking that if you take a look at the actual SRD that they released, it hasn't been updated with any of the cultural sensitivity changes that have been made to the core game.
Yeah,
So the races still have attribute adjustments and stuff like that, which has been taken out of the main game. But this is the SRD as it was published originally. So this is already, from a cultural point of view, old and busted, which may make it easier to release. Um, but it was interesting that change didn't get made, given that part of the rhetoric around the ideas that they were trying to change was that they want to be the caretakers of the community standards around those sorts of community values. And so it'll be, I think we still have to see that when the new edition comes out, what sort of licensing will come with that, whether there will be a new SRD for that edition. But who knows?
yeah. If they stand by their words, like you're saying, if they really are cultural ambassadors, they really owe it to the community to put out, one D&D in this Creative Commons to say, hey, we really want the racial trope to go away. We want it to be lineages or ancestries or such, and you can play any version of a gnome. Not one that's got a high intelligence. Your gnome could have a high charisma or whatever, and therefore we're putting this out here because we stand behind what we said.
Right.
So we'll see. Will they stand behind what they said about being culture ambassadors and being inclusive and such? And if they do, then we should see 6C. Now, no guarantee, obviously.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But what they've done completely backs down from all of the rhetoric that was threatening third-party publishers that have been building on this for 20 years. So, and there are people who would like to see the third edition SRD get released the same way. That may happen here in the near future as they move forward, but we'll see. Be fun to see them do that with fourth edition too. Release it with the Creative Commons license in a way that would make it possible to design with those rules. There were a lot of fun rules in that system too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It'd be great if they went back and did it all.
But
So they had some reserved terms in the OGL. Obviously, anything that was in their world was reserved. But in this SRD that went to Creative Commons, there's some new things that appear, like Count Stradvan Zarovich is there. You couldn't have used him
right,
anywhere outside of a DM's Guild product, I don't think, before. But now you can definitely use the name.
right,
You have to be careful copying their stat block exactly because they don't provide that. So I think all good news on all fronts for the OGL.
yeah, yeah. No, I think it's really, really big, and it was really stunning yesterday when it happened. And wins and losses are always just moments in time.
Yeah, that's
So,
absolutely true. For 22 years, we thought the OGL was unassailable,
yeah.
and they did everything they could to assail it, and they could have still gone forward,
Oh yeah.
and
No,
just fought it in court.
they made a choice, and they got some new information, but they made a choice that was the right choice for them.
Hmm.
So just happens to be a choice that we like, and works for us too, which is good.
Yes. Okay. Let's go on to some new products that are coming out here shortly or already out. So Tyranny of Dragons, the very first product, which was a third, it was Kobold Press who did Tyranny of Dragons.
Hmm.
They have re-released that. And I think if I look, oh, they also have this very nice image of it. You can find that on the Wizards Play Network. So if you go to Wizards Play Network, you can find their like release media for their products. So if you want to grab that picture for your desktop, that's a great one there at Tiamat. And the other interesting product, so that's out. And if I look in my D&D Beyond account, which I renewed the subscription on, thanks to the new the new backing down on OGL. So it's already updated. I think I have access to it. It's the new Tyranny of Dragons here that I have.
So what have they changed?
Good question. I haven't been able to figure out exactly what they changed. This was definitely a tough adventure to run, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
ran it for us. And what do you remember from running this adventure the first time we went through it?
God, it's been way too long. I don't remember anything really specific. Um,
It was still where we were kind of slaves to the XP system, right? So we were just adding in random encounters to get to the level we need to get to.
right.
And the balance of the encounters was suspect in a lot of cases. And we'll talk about encounter balance here in a second with favorite rules. It's
Right.
always been a problem with 5th edition. They talk about concept art being new, like they have some new Tiamat concept art, but as far as I can tell, I couldn't find it. All this was already there.
Hmm.
And that's some nice concept art too.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff with the followers of the dragon armies.
Hmm.
Then the next product is Keys from the Golden Vault. So this is going to release in less than a month and has had no fanfare. So I think this points to what you're saying. They needed to get off the OGL discussion.
Hmm. Well, they want that conversation to end because the movie's coming out, because there's all kinds of stuff coming that they want to be good news. Um, so and
Yeah,
Wizards is the one part of Hasbro that's succeeding right now, so they don't want to be making it worse.
absolutely. Yeah, it had to. They had to stop that conversation and get going. Here's the
Nice.
high end or the alternate cover version for Keys from the Golden Vault. And then uh, if you're a Paizo fan or if you're a Kobold Press fan, of course, they're doing their Project Black Flag, which is their new version of rules, and Paizo's got the Orc license.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of this stuff to watch as it goes through development. That'll be interesting to see what new ideas come out from all of these. Fantasy Age is got a new version coming,
Hmm.
and Paizo, they have um, a high level adventure path and a hardcover. So that's interesting. Levels 11 through 20.
Nice.
Yeah. And Gatewalkers looks real neat. It's another short adventure path. It's 3 volumes and levels, I think, 1 through 11. And then Paizo also has the Treasure Vault coming, and those products all are really gorgeous. So I started doing a lot of digging into Paizo, and
Hmm.
you've played Paizo quite a bit, Pathfinder, that is.
I've played some Pathfinder. Yeah. It's man, Paizo's. I mean, you'll remember back from the late third edition days that Paizo's adventure paths and stuff like that have always been just the best, richest, most interesting stuff that's out there. And so I'm looking forward. I really want to get into playing some of these adventure paths, whatever uh, system. But yeah, the Pathfinder 2 system has some really interesting stuff going on.
So let's transition into favorite rules from other systems. I'll start
Yes.
because I don't have nearly the experience you do, and then I'll let you take off with it and go
Mhm.
through a lot of different new stuff.
Yes. Yes.
So let's talk about Pathfinder. So Pathfinder's got the 3 action economy, and it's just so simple compared to D&D. I kind of like D&D's system, but it's got a lot of nuance, right? You have a
Yeah.
movement which you can do before or after your action. Do you want to move twice? Well, you use an action to move twice. Do you want to do a bonus action? Some things give you bonus actions that give you more movement. So in theory, you can move 3 times with 3 actions, but not every character can.
Right.
And not every character can do a bonus action. Some don't have bonus actions at all. So some are stuck with movement and an action. Now there's a little bit more hand waving in D&D, like when you can draw a weapon or not draw a weapon
Mhm.
and such, being free. There's free interactions and such. And Pathfinder's a lot more granular. I've noticed it's got little actions for every single little thing.
Yep.
You want to draw a weapon? It's an action. Um, Now they have feats in there that make a lot of those things combine with other parts of your actions. So you don't have to spend 2 actions to draw a weapon and attack. You could do both in one.
Right.
But it's very simple to explain. I like the critical success, failure, critical failure.
Yeah.
Have
That
you have you found that good?
uh, I like that a lot. It gives you that degree of success thing that we've always kind of lacked in D&D.
Hmm.
Um, and that's it's really powerful, and especially when you start exploring what you can do with some skills and other things. There's a lots of cool synergies you can get out of that. Um, so, and then critical failures are also a thing that we've all sort of stuck into D&D, but that a one is always a miss, but we haven't had critical failures in other ways, and that adds that um, opportunity for some really messy stuff.
Yeah, things can get hairy in a second when you
Yeah,
critically fail against like a dragon breath weapon and take double damage.
yeah, yeah.
Now,
So
one thing I'm seeing that's a little interesting in the D&D playtest for 6th edition is they're doing a thing where they have jump as its own action, they have fly being its own action. You can't combine movement types. And that's what Pathfinder has. If you look in Pathfinder, jumps an action, flying is an action, which is separate from striding. Um, yeah.
there's a thing where Pathfinder goes a little bit further with that
Hmm.
that I think is really cool. But it also speaks to some of the design philosophy of the games. But if you are proficient in a skill, let's say I'm proficient in deception, then I have access to the feint action, and I can use a feint in combat. Um, or I can create a distraction that give me an opportunity to hide, even if I'm out on the open. So each or many of the skills have those sorts of actions that have being proficient in the skill unlocks for you. So, and that's a thing that fifth edition kind of hand waves. And if you say, okay, well, I want to do a quick feint, the DM may say, well, that's going to take an action, and then you're because you don't have other actions in your turn, you don't have the ability to capitalize on that so well.
Hmm.
Or we just sort of hand wave it and say, well, you're always kind of feinting. It's a 6-second round. You're doing a lot of things, and so it's all sort of baked into the attack roll. But Pathfinder makes that a lot more granular. But by giving concrete rules to players, it takes some of the adjudication out of the DM's hands.
Yeah.
And that was one of the fifth edition things that was really important, was to try and give a lot of that power back to the DMs that had been given to players in these granular rules.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the tug and war of that philosophy we see between the two systems.
Yeah. I'm not so sure I don't like 5e better in how some of that stuff can just happen. But I really do like the simplicity of explaining these rules to someone in
Yeah.
Pathfinder. And I like the critical success, critical failure path. I got a comment here from YouTube saying primarily play D&D, Pathfinder 2e, and Shadow of the Demon Lord. Prefer spellcaster rules in D&D. You can talk about that a little bit, John.
Hmm.
3 action economy in Pathfinder and PTSD in Shadows of the Demon
I don't
Lord.
I don't know that one, but
I don't know that one either. But
that's
spellcasters. So talk about spellcasters a little bit.
so spellcasters in Pathfinder, most spells require 2 actions to cast, but there are some minor spells that are just 1 action. And if you're not in a position where you need to move, there's no rule against casting 2 spells in a round. So If you have enough actions, you can do it. So you can cast your lightning bolt spell and also put up a shield to protect yourself. Or right now I'm playing a bard, and one action that he takes is always an action called, or a little minor spell called Inspire Courage, and then I have 2 actions for something else. Um, those particular sorts of spells, and sort of getting back to the design of the game and the critical success at 10 or more, when you hit a DC of 10 or more, the idea that it matters what you rolled besides just beating the DC means a lot of those small additional bonuses that you get can make a big difference. If you're 1.0, if you roll a 9 better than the DC, and then you get something from the Bard's Inspire Courage that ticks you up to 10, now you've got the critical success damage instead of just the success damage, that sort of thing. So um, there's a lot of rewards for little advantages that you can stack up to try and make attacks, which rewards smart play. But as far as the spellcasting, getting back to that, it's
I think the prepared spells is a big difference, right?
it is, and that
Yeah.
is hard going back to that. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. It's not
Having
only the prepared, but it's like you got to prepare the spell per slot, right?
right, right,
And you got
right,
if you want to heighten it, you got to prepare the heightened spell in the heightened slot.
right. It is a lot more work. It's a lot more planning.
Mhm.
Um, and I very much prefer 5e for that. I find, so that's not true for all spellcasting classes either. Sorcerers have a lot more freedom. My bard has a lot more freedom, but the wizard it's a demanding class to play because of that.
Yeah.
And that's a factor.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the one thing I was looking at. I was like, I don't know about that. Okay. Oh, and the other thing on the spell casting. So in 5e, having to explain, well, you cast the bonus spell, so now you can only cast a cantrip. Um, but if you did an action surge because you're a fighter wizard, you could cast 2 regular spells. It was way confusing for no
Right,
good reason.
right,
Okay, so then in Pathfinder, fighters don't get multiple attacks,
right,
right? Everyone gets multiple attacks, and it's your regular attack on the first action, -5 or -4 for agile weapons, and then -10 or -8 for agile weapons for your 3 attacks.
right,
So D&D can get kind of crazy. A fighter with 3 attacks around, action surging, a hasted is getting like 7 attacks. So that it can get way overboard. Um, which one do you think you prefer between those two?
I like both. I mean, I think that there's flavor and interest in both. I think that the 5th edition flurry of attacks that a high level fighter can get compared to a high level spellcaster actually helps balance the effectiveness of those high level spellcasters who can really bend reality in crazy ways. That high level fighter is going to put out a ton of damage every round, and that's appropriate, I think. The Pathfinder is a lot stingier that way with those attacks, and that continues to be interesting as you try and balance all that. But um, it's easy, especially for inexperienced players, to spend 2 or 3 actions around swinging at somebody who's hard to hit, hoping for a 20, rather than taking advantage of some of the other rules that may make that one swing you do take stronger. And trying to make your one attack as strong as it can be, rather than just crit fishing.
I did see there's a lot of system mastery involved, with
Absolutely,
what
yeah,
what other things can you do? Can you demoralize someone?
right.
Do you stay and fight 3 times, or do you attack twice and step back to force them to step forward to you to then
Yeah,
attack? Or
that action economy is really important. If you're a party fighting against 1 or 2 big opponents, then forcing them to move and giving up an action to swat at you is huge.
yeah, yeah. So that's fun. I mean, I like system mastery in the tactical aspects. It's certainly a much more tactical game. I was thinking to myself as people were like, you know, Exodus from D&D going to Pathfinder. I'm like, do you guys know how tactical this game is? It's a much more tactical game, which I like, but
Yeah.
not everyone does. Okay, so let's talk about. Let's see, I had another one from Facebook here. Toss up for preferring extra attacks over the 3 attacks Pathfinder. Flanking, that's a thing again, and I mean, you can have flanking in D&D as an optional rule. You
Right.
can give the flankers advantage, which is a big bonus. It's like more like a +3/+4 bonus.
Yeah. I think, the one of the things that I loved about 4th edition D&D that I miss like crazy in 5th edition, and that isn't there quite so much in Pathfinder, is a lot of the tactical stuff like forced movement,
Yeah,
and just battlefield control stuff that you could do. Um, that was really, really interesting gameplay. Really interesting tactical wargaming fun. Um, and neither of these editions really has quite so much of that element.
right. Okay, let's go on to encounter design. So in Pathfinder, here's the encounter design budget. That's really small. Let's see if I can blow that up a little bit. There we go. So here's the encounter design budget. So if you have a party of 4 players and you want to do a modern, say you have a party of 5 players, and you want to do a modern encounter, you have 100 XPs. And party level -2, you do 5 of those. That'd be 100 XPs. Party level and party level +1, you do 1 of each, and that'd be 100 XPs. And it's that simple. And I think Pathfinder does a better job of balancing the characters versus the players. I mean, the monsters versus the player characters. And so it's really straightforward, really simple to set up encounters. Now, I don't have a lot of experience running Pathfinder, so I don't know how it actually plays out. Um, but it'd
I
be nice to have a simplified something this simple to go.
Yeah.
There's Mike Shea's system, and there's some other simplified systems, and hopefully they'll adapt that for 6th edition.
Yeah. Encounter design for me really um, becomes an art, especially my game tends towards bigger, high challenge encounters and more frequent rests rather than lots of small encounters. And so all of that really changes the way you design that one big encounter. Um, and I haven't had a chance to play with this very much, and I haven't run Pathfinder 2, so I can't speak very well to whether they're what appears to be a simple encounter building rules, whether it works better than the 5th edition rules or any of the alternatives that are out there.
I think what you said is key. It really is an art,
Yeah.
and you can really play with it as the DM while you're even running an encounter. You can
Oh yeah.
add more combatants to the encounter. Mid counter, you can change some of the combatants that haven't entered the fight yet. If you see you did it too strong and change their hit points, you can change how much damage they do on the fly and stuff like that. So it really is an art.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. There's
and
so many dials you can play with as DM.
mhm,
That and the other thing is that for me, what really makes memorable, interesting encounters isn't the math behind the creatures. It's
mhm,
what other things besides killing things are going on in the encounter. What's the terrain doing? What synergy is going on between the monsters and other monsters in their group or the monsters in the environment? All of those things make for really interesting encounters in a way that a table like this can't really express.
right. All right, let's go on to the last of the ones I have. And this is from 4th edition D&D. I really liked the area of effects from 4th edition D&D. It was so easy to adjudicate at the table with every circle being a square. You could easily outline the periphery of any of your spells or powers with just 5 dice. So I'd always have these small colored dice with me that I could just, lay on the table so everyone could see quickly where things were,
Hmm.
as opposed to the more detailed templates that you need for things that are more like a circle.
Hmm.
Um, of course, with the virtual tabletops, that kind of isn't as necessary. The
Right.
other nice thing about the areas from 4th edition is it was very well easy to adjudicate in 3 dimensions as well,
Hmm.
which a fireball in 3 dimensions gets really hard to figure out where the edges are.
Right. No, I think that's all true, but it's um, it's interesting that our sense of what works well and what doesn't is really dependent upon the tools that we're using to play and what's the easiest in that environment. I'm using Fantasy Grounds. It is a matter of 2 or 3 clicks to get a circle on the board at the right size, and I can just drop it on the board and then target everybody in it. It takes, a half dozen clicks and I'm done. And I can, draw something on the board and leave it there if it's an area of effect, and that circle is just as easy to draw as a square. So the 4th edition square circles don't need to exist anymore.
Unless you're playing tabletop.
Right.
Yeah,
and
it's nice.
The thing that I love that 5th edition simplified in that is diagonal moves are just in 5th edition 5 feet, 5 feet, 5 feet. Pathfinder is 5'10", 5'10".
That was so hard to go back to, playing some Pathfinder doing that.
Really, really hard to go back.
It's like, yeah, it's more realistic. You got me, but I like it better the other way.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, that's the ones I have. You want to share your screen, John?
Yeah, sure. Well, while we're still talking about 4th edition, and I don't have a screen to put up for that, but let me find my notes on 4th. Because there was one other thing about 4th edition. Oh, yeah, minions.
Yeah.
I mean, 4th edition minions were the best. It's just great to feel like you're super powerful and doing a ton with area effect things and just feels cinematic and big. So there are ways that you can get at that, but minions were also really simple for the DM to run. They always did the same amount of damage. It was never a ton of damage, but you didn't have to roll for it. So it was just, do they hit or not? And if they get hit, they go down. Just super easy, super quick. I think that was a design thing that we really need back. But let me... Screen sharing is easiest with 2 monitors. So I'm going to share my screen. And share that screen. And move my stuff over there.
So while you're doing that, I'm looking at the 4th edition Monster Manual here real quick to look at minion rules. I forget where exactly they're at, but let's pull up a regular minion here. There we go. Aboleth Servitor. Yeah, just doing a set damage, not rolling dice. And of course, any hit kills, and miss never kills. And you can just really throw in a bunch of those and mow through them. A lot of fun, I think.
Yep.
Okay, let me share or add your screen to the stream.
All right. So I've run some Fate. I like Fate a lot. One of the easiest things that you can take from Fate and just bolt into any game you want, really, is the idea of aspects, which are just a phrase that describes a thing about a thing. So characters or NPCs or monsters can have aspects, environments can have aspects, items can have aspects, and those aspects can get used to gain a bonus or a penalty, depending. And if I was taking the idea of an aspect and putting it in D&D, it would be a thing I would just try and use in a concrete way to describe an environment, say. So if the streets are wet, I would say that I just create the wet streets aspect. It's a thing that I describe when I'm talking to the players. And then the players and I can both use that aspect as a way to gain bonuses or apply penalties when they're trying to do things. The wet streets, and maybe it's pouring rain or something like that. That may make Fireball less effective, because, or add 2 to your saving throw against Fireball because you're soaked, and it's going to make it easier to resist the fire damage, or whatever we want to do. We can, especially in a game like 5th edition that's freer with those sorts of DM decisions. Aspects lets us describe those sorts of things, but communicate it to the players in a way that allows them to use them too, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think that, and there's a lot of cool things about Fate, but I think that design idea of the aspect is one of my favorite things that anybody can use anywhere.
Are you
Uh,
gonna try and hit one thing per game? That's pretty interesting.
um,
You might hit a couple more for some
well,
games, but yeah.
some games I'll hit a few more. Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing about with aspects is that they can be created. So if we're having a fight in a tavern and one player decides to create the highly flammable aspect in around the bar by pouring alcohol everywhere, um, that's an aspect they could do. They can spend their action and do that, and now that whole area is very, very flammable. And that may seem like a throwaway action, but if you allow a rogue with cunning action to do that as a bonus action, then that suddenly gives those rogues a thing that they can do with their cunning actions, that interaction that is very asks them to really pay attention to the environment, about things they might be able to do. That's very, very cool. Very,
Yeah.
very interesting. All right. So I wanted to talk about one idea that Gumshoe has. Um, Gumshoe rule system is a system that's primarily designed for investigative games. I've mostly played a time travel game called Time Watch. That's a Gumshoe game, but there's a wide variety of Gumshoe-based games. But Gumshoe has a this concept of clues and gathering clues, and this is just a great tip. I mean, it's a game concept in Gumshoe, but as a thing for a DM to internalize. In their skill system is a little different, so it's a little bit wobbly. But in Gumshoe, if your character is proficient in a skill and they walk into a room where there are clues to gather, there's a certain baseline clue that they get just because they walked in the room and they have that particular proficiency. Which means if I'm designing that encounter and I want them to uh, interact with what's going on there and gain that information, I'm just going to give, if I'm going to figure out ahead of time what clues I'm going to give to the characters based on what proficiencies. And as I'm designing encounters and environments, that's something that I want to do for basically everything. What are the things that, somebody who is trained in religion will notice? What are the things that somebody who's trained in thievery will notice about the room? And if you can put 2, 3, 5 of those sorts of clues in every environment, and then see who gets that information, and even more fun, give it to those characters in whispers. One, if you have the digital tools to give them whispers, or give it to them as a note or something like that, and have that prepared ahead of time. That's a great way to give them ways to talk to each other about what they notice, to give them secret information that they may not share, and they just get to act on themselves. Just a lot of really fun options there.
Yeah, I really like that. My first organized play experience was a investigation adventure, which was like 4 hours of us failing skill checks and never getting to the end. And
Right,
it
right,
was so
right.
frustrating. Um, and I like taking skills like religion. Well, when I do a lot of new players or different players playing, they all have perception. They all have insight, because that's the only rules that seem to ever come up. So
Right,
I like rewarding religion skill and history skill and anything
right,
like that with what's the cool thing in this adventure that they wrote to the DM that the players will never find out.
right.
I try and
How do you
give the
get
players that information if
right,
they have
right,
those
right.
skills.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That DM background stuff they always
Yep.
put at the beginning of the adventure, those 2 pages of stuff that explain the whole adventure in a way no one will ever understand if
Yeah,
they're
no
not
player
the
will
DM.
ever see.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
like trying to get that
That's
out.
that's terrible. Yeah, we need to never have that. Uh, all right. So I'm a big fan of Blades in the Dark and Forged in the Dark games. This is the Blades in the Dark SRD. And there's a lot of cool things in here. I want to talk about 2, but the first one is just this concept of progress clocks, which is, I mean, the basic idea of the clock, and you can see it. In this one, the example you see, there's a 4-tick clock, there's a 6-tick clock, or an 8-tick clock. You can have as many as you want. The diagram of, the pi squares, or the circle broken up into sections, that's just a fun interesting way to present it. It gives us a very visceral countdown if you can show that to the players and let them see what they're seeing. Blades in the Dark uses tons of these clocks. There's clocks for everything that's going on. So if they're trying to sneak into a castle, there's a clock that is the sort of alert level of the guards, and every little thing that goes wrong creates a tick on that clock. And so tension builds as we get closer to that happening. But if players are working on a project or trying to learn a skill, they get progress clocks for that. If they're trying to convince a merchant to give them a bargain, there may be a progress clock for that. And it's just a variation on some ideas like skill challenges and stuff like that. But the idea of having these clocks sort of all over the place lets us be doing lots of these sorts of progress things at the same time. And some may be competing. We might have the clock that is your ability to sneak into the keep, and you need 6 successes on that. But there's a guard alert level that is 4 ticks, and if those 4 ticks happen before your 6 ticks happen, then some catastrophic thing happens. So there's a ton of ways to leverage all of this, and I just like having the drawings available. I like being able to track all of those different things, and it's just a really, really cool, meaty thing about the system that's really pretty simple. This page talks about lots of the different types of clocks that you can have.
I really like that idea. I mean, last time I ran was the party infiltrating an enemy army camp,
Right.
and this would have been perfect for that.
It's very, very cool. And then another thing that Blades does really well, I've never seen a system that really incorporates downtime as an important part of the role-playing game itself, and not just a thing you might do as an email between the DM and the player between sessions. Hey, did you want to try and work on your, the language you're trying to learn? Okay. I mean, it creates the Blades and Fortune the Dark games have a group template, and you choose a type of group, and there are group goals, and you're making progress on efforts to try and gain some more turf or add to your starship, depending upon the version of the game you're playing. So there's all of those sorts of things going on, and that's really cool. But there's also lots of NPC factions. You're not just operating in an environment, alone in an environment in a vacuum. There are lots of factions around you, and those factions all over time during those downtime phases have their own goals and are making progress towards their own goals. And there's a very simple, easy way to track that and manage that in the downtime section here. And we have, what am I looking for? That's all well, I'm not finding it. But basically what you can do, there are factions, and each so the faction, especially at low level, might be a gang of a half dozen guys. It might be the city watch. It might be all followers of a faith. They're working towards a goal. Every time there's a period of downtime, you roll a d6 for each of those groups. On a 1 through 3, they make 1 tick on their clock. On a 4 or 5, they make 2. On a 6, they make 3. And when they fill that clock and achieve their thing, that gives that group the advantage they were trying to get to. If they were racing against a competing group, maybe they beat that group to the punch, and now they've taken over the turf that the two were competing for. And so it lets you create very simply, very easily, a sort of living world that the players are interacting in. So I dig that a lot.
Yeah, that's really cool.
All right. I'm a huge Savage Worlds fan. This is PDF of the new edition, and I wanted to. They have a skill challenge equivalent system called Dramatic Tasks. That's pretty cool. They have a system called Fast Combat that I think is something that it doesn't translate very well. You wouldn't want to just bolt those rules onto D&D, But the idea of being able to do a montage of several combat scenes where we describe a scene. Okay, you fight your way past some of these guards, or you're dashing through the woods and you have, you encounter a couple of natives with blowguns and you have to get past them. Whatever things that we're having that party encounter, we don't have to put down figures and have a whole map for it. We don't have to do a full theater of the mind thing to try and move that faster. Let's settle it with a single roll. And this is a place where adapting, adding to it some of the Pathfinder degrees of success might be useful. But pick a skill, tell me how you're using it, make the skill roll. If you succeed, then you get by. If you fail, then you lose some resource. If you get a critical failure or a critical success, it's worse. Maybe there's a way to decide to commit a resource like a spell slot or something like that to get a bonus on the roll that you make. Maybe you can make that choice before or after. There's a lot of ways to play around with that system, but I really like the idea of just being able to create those montage scenes. It's another way to try and get at the same thing that minions are trying to get to, that idea that we can just mow through things quickly. Savage Worlds also has a system for what it calls tricks and tests, but it's a system for using skills other than combat skills in combat. And it's a very pulpy game, so it wants you to do things like pull rugs out from under people and knock them prone that way, or swing on chandeliers, or insult them and get them flustered or angry or something like that. Pathfinder 2 has bon mots and stuff like that, which do similar things, or demoralize. So there's systems that do a lot of that sort of thing, but I think that's a cool thing from Savage Worlds I'd love to try and bring in. And then the superpowers rules for Savage Worlds had a couple of things that are interesting. Coordinated attacks is a really interesting idea, where it's trying to provide a rule for the superpowers game that sort of mimics when in the comic books we see the two heroes with related powers combining their powers to try and do something bigger than their single powers can operate on. If players want to try and do things like target places where somebody else, this was a line in the I watched the new episodes of Vox Machina last night, and there's a line where Vex is telling everyone to target the places where the dragon's already been hit. And theoretically, those are places where the scales are already chipped away or something like that. Maybe that's a way of using coordinated attacks. So thinking about how to apply that to your game is useful. It also has rules for knockback, and I'd love to see something that let us, again, with some of that forced movement stuff. Is there a way, if you get a critical success with a bludgeoning weapon, can you get, knock somebody back for free or something like that? So, but the last thing I want to talk about with Savage Worlds, which has been a core concept for the game forever, is the idea of trappings. And this is a thing we can always do, but Savage Worlds sort of bakes it in. So in D&D, when we cast a spell to do damage to somebody that's a range away from us, we have lots of different spells for doing that. We have Magic Missile, we have Lightning Bolt, we have Scorching Ray, we have Acid Arrow, all the different things. They have different energy types, different mechanics, all that sort of thing. In Savage Worlds, there's one spell called Bolt that does all of those things. And when you take the Bolt spell, you, as the player, decide what the trappings are. And they can have some mechanical effects. So it's going to be something that's like Scorching Ray. Maybe it also has a chance to set the target on fire or set inanimate objects on fire. That's all just trappings that we put on top of that. And what my players and some of my players do in my 5e game is they take their spells like Magic Missile or whatever that are just basic things, and then rename them, redescribe what they are. They have the same mechanical effect, but we interpret it in a different way. One of my players does that in a relatively comic, cosmetic way, whereas spells are just sort of named for different types of wallop or stuff like that. And another player is imagining a bard sorcerer character whose powers come from the ghost of his grandmother who follows him around. And so all of those spells are really his grandmother's ghost going out and doing things rather than just him doing it.
That's good.
And that's dynamite. And I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to have a different mechanical effect, but how much more flavorful is that?
Yeah.
If you're going to steal anything from Savage Worlds, steal trappings first.
Yeah. It's a little bit like reskinning, not exactly the same, but trappings sure sounds better than reskinning.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I like that.
And then I'll share one last thing. And I brought it up here. This is PDF of the index card role-playing game system, which is a D&D spin-off game. I mean, it's in a very basic way, it's a D20 sort of system with this D&D 6 attributes and stuff like that. It's incredibly stripped down. There are no skills. There are very basic characters with a handful of attributes. It's a lot of sort of exceptions-based design kind of things. It's great for a quick con game kind of thing. It's good for sort of improvisational play. So it has a lot of that kind of stuff. But it may not be great for a lot of more system. It requires very little system mastery. So if tactics and system mastery are what you want, that may be less of a challenge. But it has some great guidance and rules for GMs who are designing encounters that I think is something everyone should buy this game and just read. And let me find my way to that again here quickly. It's got this room design and guides for designing scenes and that sort of thing, and tuning challenges. It's a simpler game, so the DCs are maybe a little bit different, but
Like you said, it looks like a really good game just to pick up, just to hone your craft as a DM.
yes, it's absolutely worthwhile for that, especially if you're needing to come up with things quickly. And we already have in D&D, they give you some guidance about what a moderate challenge is, a hard challenge is. We can see what those DCs are and work with that. It has a concept called effort, and in this, what I like about this, and it's a way to sort of get at that need we have to be able to express progress towards a goal that isn't always damage. So D&D is really good at showing us making progress towards the goal of killing the dragon. You hit it, that succeeds, you do some damage to it, that damage takes you incrementally towards the goal of defeating the dragon. But if I'm trying to climb the wall, I either succeed or I don't. But in the index card game, you get everything that is the roll you make after the roll to succeed, which in an attack would be damage. All of those are just called effort. And if you're trying to climb a wall, you get an effort die and you roll that die, and that chips away at the process of climbing the wall. If you're trying to pick a lock, you make progress towards picking the lock. If you're trying to convince the priest, you make progress towards doing that with that effort die. And it's always a challenge based on numbers of tens, so which are expressed as hearts if you're just drawing it on your index card, because again, if it's an index card, it has to be really simple. But if this is going to be a very tough trap that we need to get out of, maybe it's going to take 3 hearts of progress to get out of it, and everybody gets to make skill checks and try and make effort contributions towards doing that. And so that, as a very quick and dirty design thing, is really interesting. But yeah, I think this is a system everyone should just have on their shelf and read through and just let it feed the way you design encounters, both prepared and improvised.
Well, this has been really, really cool. I think I want to do this again sometime, John. I'm sure you got more games that you can go over. Um, Again, we got the OGLs open for um, 1.0A and also the SRD now. So hopefully that whole thing is mostly behind us. We keep the pressure on, make sure none of the executives there change their mind. But they're pretty much locked in on at least 5.1. I mean, it's
Yeah,
out there. It'll always be out there, and that's great news. It'd
yeah,
be very nice if the next version of D&D was on an OGL or a Creative Commons and any previous versions.
yeah.
And
I hope it
good.
has some sort of licensing, and I hope that it is better than the fourth edition license. But it will be its own thing.
And we all started investigating other game systems, and I think that's a huge thing to keep investigating other game systems. So many great ideas out there. If you get a chance to play them, play them. I'll always love Dungeons and Dragons, so I'll be playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm happy that the holders currently of that game are doing a little better today than they were 2 days ago.
When's Winter Fantasy? Is that next weekend
Next
or?
week, yeah, I've been digging out my miniatures. First time in like 2 years, I've played a face-to-face game, I think.
That's cool.
My miniatures are all covered in dust, but I'm digging those out. Gonna be running Dragonlance there, the Vault of the Undying campaign.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I'm excited about all of that. I wish I was going to Winter Fantasy this year.
Yeah, and I hope to get to see a lot of people that I've met online over these last 2-3 years there. All right, any last words, John?
Nope.
All right, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you again next week.
All right.
Bye, everyone.